Thank you very much, Count Corla, and I move the resolution. And before I address the substance of the resolution here this evening and lay out the rationale for it, I know, as I believe will be the case with many of the speakers this evening, as important as these issues are and as acutely aware as I am of how much they matter to so many in our country, of course, we're all very moved and deeply aware of the horror of what is happening in Ukraine at the moment and aware of the obligations that we will have to the many, many thousands of Ukrainians that will come to our homes here in Ireland and the commitments that we will have to them that I know the Irish people and the government are determined to discharge. In terms of the motion here itself, to address the economic background to it, the opening point I'd like to make to the Dáil here this evening is to emphasise that we are in the very, very early days of the economic consequences of a war, the duration of those consequences, the scale of them, what they will mean for our country, what they will mean for our economy. At this point is still unclear. But we know the risks are very significant. We know the risks, while they are very different to that which those in the Ukraine are facing, we know nonetheless from an economic point of view that they are very serious for families, for employers and for our economy. But again, I do want to emphasise that we are in the early moments of all of this, that there may well indeed be so many other challenges that we need to face, the obligations that we will have to meet the humanitarian needs of all those who will come to our country, other challenges that we may have in other parts of our economy. Minister McConaughey has already indicated this evening that he will need to provide further support and further interventions to those who work in our agricultural communities to help with the supply of food. So as we do our bit to work our way through the consequences of this war, we're at an early phase of it. There are very significant economic risks, and those economic risks do need recognition, and we do need to ensure that we make decisions that I believe are sensible, that can have an impact, and that will also be affordable to our country and ones that we are capable of sustaining. And as I look at that point of the need to sustain them, I'm also very, very conscious that when I talk about issues with regard to our national finances and the need for those to be sustainable, I know that what will be motivating all deputies here in the House this evening as they speak on the resolution is the personal finances of so many who are now affected by the rising cost of energy, by the rising prices that we are seeing happening in our garages and forecourts. I know also for many who are in businesses, particularly our smaller domestic-owned businesses, the change in the cost of energy, what it means for those, particularly I acknowledge who are in our haulage, our transport sector. I acknowledge that for those in our business community that what is happening with the rising price of energy is also a great concern to them. And I acknowledge that for those pulling up in the forecourt, pulling up in the garage, to seeing the price of the tank of petrol, the tank of diesel going up and up, that this is obviously a great cause of concern to them and a cause, I know, of much anxiety to many. I recognise that. I want to play my part in making a difference to that. The government wants to play its part in alleviating some of the difficulty that many are facing at the moment, but equally, I do want to emphasise to deputies here this evening that the forces that are causing the changes in prices, the change in energy, that these measures are responding to are measures that are the consequences of a war. There were changes taking place in our economy before then, changes taking place in energy markets, but they have been heightened beyond recognition by the consequences of a land war in Europe. And that is a development that is beyond the control of this government and much of the consequences that we will need to deal with. We can play a role in helping our economy deal with. We can help with those costs. We can offer support. We can make a difference. But we cannot insulate our economy, insulate our business community, insulate those who are concerned about the price of fuel entirely from the changes that are taking place. It's not possible for this or for any other government to give a commitment that we can insulate and that we can offset all of the costs that are due to happen due to this war that is taking place at the moment. But what we can do is make a difference. What we can do is help. And that is what this motion is aiming to do here this evening. What I'm doing, Cathaoirleach, in bringing forward this financial resolution to the Dáil here this evening is proposing a 20-cent reduction in the excise rate for petrol and a 15-cent reduction on auto diesel, with a proportionate 2-cent reduction for excise on marked gas oil. The measures that I'm proposing to the House this evening are VAT inclusive, and they will last until the 31st of August 2022. If for those who are filling up their cars across this time, who are filling up their cars again so conscious of what the rising price of fuel can mean for them, for their families, for their living standards, particularly after all that we've gone through with this pandemic, this will offer help of between €9 and €12 to that tank of petrol, to that tank of diesel. I know since these measures were announced, further changes have taken place in the price of energy. I accept in the coming period that we will see further developments that will have a further difficult impact on many as we see further changes in the price of energy. But the measures the government are bringing forward aim to offer help. They aim to make a change in our excise so that the changes that I know many will have to deal with will be €9 to €12 less due to the change that we are making in excises in this financial resolution here this evening. What these reductions aim to do, Cathaoirleach, is aim to get the balance right between trying to give help to many at a time in which they really need it, recognising that we will have other challenges within our country, within our economy, other obligations that we will need to rise to that will also require additional money and funding, and at the same time allowing the government to continue to make progress on the issues that mattered to very many before the consequences of the war in Ukraine. And what we are looking to do is get the balance right between both those imperatives. And at the same time, what I also need to do is bring forward measures that respect the minimum rates that are allowable under the Energy Tax Directive of the European Union. So the measures that we are bringing forward here, Cathaoirleach, in terms of the revenue impact, overall, the 6-month decrease in the excise on these fuels will have a cost to the Exchequer of €320 million. This is, by budgetary standards, a very large commitment of the country's money to responding back to this challenge, but it is so important that we do what we can to make a difference, that we can offer this help, and this €320 million across the coming months is help of €9 to €12 on the price of a tank of petrol, of a tank of diesel, at a time in which the government knows further changes are likely. What I then want to do, Cathaoirleach, is speak to the amendments that have been brought forward by the opposition and speak to the changes that they are looking to make. The amendments that have been tabled to this financial resolution have been tabled by Sinn Féin and tabled by the Rural Independent Group. The amendment brought forward from Deputy Doherty seeks a 34-cent reduction in mineral oil tax on petrol and a 25-cent reduction on diesel. The amendment also seeks to remove carbon tax on kerosene until the 1st of May. The Deputy is also looking for a report with regard to the impact of these measures. The amendment from the Rural Independent Group seeks a 58-cent reduction in tax on petrol and a 45-cent reduction on diesel. The amendment also seeks to suspend all of the carbon tax from tonight and to cut VAT on energy products to 5%. Cathaoirleach, many of the measures that have been tabled here this evening are actually not possible to currently implement. A reduction in excise of 25% for diesel, as tabled by Deputy Doherty, would not be consistent with the minimum rate set out in the Energy Tax Directive. The combined effect of the measures I've announced today, along with the scheduled 1-cent reduction to offset the biofuel obligation scheme increase and also to recognise the impact of the diesel rebate scheme means that any further excise reduction would bring the effective rate below the minimum permissible rate. Furthermore, the reductions that are being proposed by the Rural Independent Group for petrol and diesel will bring the rates for both fuels below the minimum rates that are allowable under the Energy Tax Directive. So what does this directive do? The directive sets out the minimum levels of taxation that are applicable to these energy products for specific fuel uses. For diesel that is used as a propellant, the minimum rate equates to 33 cents per litre. For petrol, it is 35.9 cents per litre. So what I'm doing in the change that I'm making with regard to diesel is I'm taking the excise that is due on diesel down to the lowest level that is currently permissible under the relevant directive for taxation with regard to energy. The Sinn Féin amendment will remove the carbon tax on kerosene until the 1st of May, while the Rural Independent Group amendment will remove the carbon tax on all fuels until the energy crisis and the impacts of it are fully understood in their amendment and an economic evaluation is published and laid before the Oireachtas. Now, the subject here, of carbon taxation is one that was debated at length here in this House over the last number of weeks. I again make the case here, which I accept is a difficult case to make, in an environment where we're seeing the cost of energy go up and up and up, that carbon taxation does have a valuable role to play, particularly in an energy environment where we're not seeing prices go up with the speed that they are, in gradually over time changing the decisions that transport users, that businesses make regarding the use of fuel and what fuels they use, and also at the same time creating the money, creating the resources that are needed to invest in a lower carbon future. That's the case that I've made to this House in the past with regard to carbon taxation. But what I think is particularly relevant to the debate that we are happening here tonight is just to be very clear about what is the impact of the increases in carbon taxation on the changes in fuel prices that the House will debate here this evening. If you look, for example, at petrol, this month, a year ago, the average petrol price per litre was €1.36. As the House is well aware, we're seeing that petrol for many petrol users, for many cars, for many vehicles, now go well in excess of €2 over the last 24 hours. The additional taxation due to the increase in carbon taxation is 2 cents. So out of all of the changes that are taking place in the price of energy at the moment, which I acknowledge is having an effect for so many, the change in carbon taxation is having a small impact on the total level of change that is happening at the moment. It is a very small contributor to changes that are underway. It is 2 cents on the price of a litre of petrol of all of the changes that are taking place at the moment. The narrative that is being brought forward by some, that the changes in the price of energy are being caused by increases in carbon taxation, that is the main reason for changes in relation to the price of fuel, that's wrong. It's incorrect. It does a disservice to the role that carbon taxation may yet play in helping us avoid even greater climate chaos in the future. And it's also a small contribution to the total level of change that is taking place at the moment. And I say again, it's 2 cents at a time in which we have seen the increase in petrol go above the €2 mark. That said, of course I accept that it is a cause of concern to many in the House, at a point in which we are seeing so much change happening in the price of fuel. The role of taxation in contributing to that is something that this House will debate. It's something that I know some in the opposition will look to change. But it is this taxation that in turn is funding the public services that this House again and again says we need more of and we need a higher quality of them. The taxes with regard to excise in relation to fuel is over €2 billion per year. That is €2 billion per year. That is helping pay for our nurses, our doctors, our teachers. It is €2 billion a year that not only will make a contribution to paying for the public services that we need now, but it's an invaluable contribution in the context of the change and challenges that the Irish economy may yet need to confront and may yet need to overcome, which we will overcome, which we will prevail over. In relation to the final point, that is a core theme of the amendments that have been brought forward here with regard to VAT. As some in the House will be aware, Ireland has retained its historical application of one of the reduced rates of VAT, 13.5%, to a range of services. And Cathaoirleach, they include the supply of fuel, of gas, of oil and electricity. And under the directive, the rate applicable to such services can be maintained, but cannot be reduced below 12%. If it is reduced below that level, even on a temporary basis, we face the prospect of losing the derogation of the reduced rate and having to return back to the higher standard rate of 23%. So that is a perspective on the different amendments that have been brought forward here this evening that I know the Dáil will debate. I want to go back to the opening points that I made in framing the economic context for the resolutions that are being brought forward. We are, as I said, Cathaoirleach, in the early days as a country of having both to understand the economic consequences of a war that is taking place, that is accelerating and is changing forces that were already underway in the global economy. But if we're in the early days of understanding what will be their long-term impact, of course we know now what is the impact of them on the lives of those who are experiencing the change in the price of a diesel, the change in the price of all other fuels. But we have many other challenges. We have many other consequences that we may need to deal with as a result of this war. We have changes that are now taking place with regard to the cost of energy that we know, and I've underscored this throughout my entire contribution, we know it is having an effect on many at the moment. We know it is a cause of concern, of anxiety to employers, to those who depend on the car to commute, to go to work, to go to school. We appreciate the impact that that is having. But the forces behind that change are due to a war that is taking place that in turn is affecting where we are with the price of energy. And while we can help with some of this cost, while we can play a role in alleviating some of it, and we are, by bringing forward measures that this evening, when the Dáil adopts this financial resolution, will help with the cost of a price of a tank of diesel, of petrol, by between €9 and €12. That is a difference that I know many will want more of, but it is help. It is something that will make a difference. We do this in the context of many other challenges we may yet need to rise to, and many other challenges that the government may yet need to fund responses to. Just as we cannot insulate ourselves from the humanitarian consequences of what is happening, we also here this evening cannot suggest that we can insulate ourselves fully from the economic consequences of what are happening. We understand the challenge. The government understands the difficulty that so many faces. We can help with it. We want to help, and through the resolution that has been brought forward here tonight, we are aiming to make that difference while also readying ourselves for other consequences and other challenges that may approach that this country, with, I hope, the support of this Dáil, will yet be able to overcome. Thank you.